11 a.m. sun was beating down on Wilshire Boulevard for nothing. I was on the sidewalk in front of the Memorial Clinic with a plastic bag in my hand that contained my lab results and a prescription I hadn't been able to fill yet. I had been waiting for more than 20 minutes. I had called my son 3 times. All 3 times he had answered. All 3 times he had told me he was on his way. Then I saw him. His gray SUV, the same one I had helped him pay the down payment for 4 years ago, drove slowly down the avenue. He was in the next lane over, exactly where I was standing. I saw him perfectly. He saw me, too. I know, because he hit the brakes for a moment, barely a second, then kept right on going. I dialed his number for the 4th time. "I just can't park right now, Mom. Traffic is a nightmare. Catch an Uber. Come on, I'll pay for it." He hung up before I could say a word. I just stood there staring at my phone screen, 63 years old, a whole lifetime of working, saving, sacrificing. And there I was, standing on an LA sidewalk with swollen feet, plastic bag of lab results in my hand, and my son had just told me to catch an Uber. I took a deep breath. I dropped the phone into my purse, and right then, something inside me shifted into a different place. It wasn't anger, though there was plenty of that, too. It was more like clarity, when you finally get enough light to see what you've been trying to read in the dark for a long time. I walked to the corner and hailed a cab. "My name is Rose. I'm originally from Bakersfield, though I've been living in Los Angeles for over 30 years. I worked my whole life as a bookkeeper for a wholesale grocery distributor. It's not a glamorous job. Nobody writes songs about the people who balance ledgers and file invoices. But it's honest work, and I did it well for 28 years. My husband, God rest his soul, died when my son was 16. It was a massive stroke, 0 warning. A Tuesday afternoon, from one day to the next, I was left alone with a teenager and a mortgage that still had 12 years left on it. I didn't break. I didn't have the time. I worked double shifts when I had to. I baked pies to sell on weekends for almost 2 years. I turned down vacations I never ended up taking. I did it all so my son, who I'm just going to call my son here, because he'll know who he is if this ever reaches his ears, could finish his degree without debt and without worry. He graduated with an industrial engineering degree at 24. That day, I cried happy tears from the second row of his university auditorium. It was one of the most beautiful days of my life. 3 years later, he met his wife. She comes from a Pasadena family, people with old money, a hyphenated last name, and a habit of looking at everyone else like they're always calculating if it's worth the effort to know them. Right from the start, I had a bad feeling, but I kept my mouth shut. You learn that some gut feelings are better left unsaid, at least at first. They got married, rented an apartment. My son started moving up at work, and things seemed to be going well. I would visit them on Sundays when they invited me, which wasn't every Sunday, but I didn't hold it against them. Kids have their own lives, I would tell myself. It's completely normal. What wasn't quite so normal was when, 2 years after the wedding, my son called me with a proposition. It was a Saturday morning. I was watering the potted plants on my windowsill when the phone rang. My son had a different voice that day. A voice I recognized instantly, 'cause it was the exact same voice he used as a little boy when he wanted to ask for something he knew was a big deal. "Mom, listen, we found a condo in Silver Lake. It's in a great spot, 2 bedrooms, brand new. The thing is, we don't have the full down payment right now, Bank is asking for 20% to approve the mortgage. I stayed quiet for a moment. How much is 20%? I asked. $280,000. At that time, I had $300,000 saved up. It was the savings of 20 solid years. The money I had tucked away, penny by penny, for my old age. So I wouldn't have to depend on anyone, so I wouldn't be a burden. I told him I needed to think about it. He said, of course, no rush. I didn't sleep well that night. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea I never drank, and I just thought for hours. I thought about how my son was the only real thing I had left in this world. I thought about how he had grown up without a father. I thought that maybe this was the moment I could help him build something solid. Something that would be truly his. And I thought, the kind of naive hope that love sometimes gives us, that making this sacrifice would bring him closer to me. The next day, I called him and said yes. We put the down payment together. The mortgage went under his name and his wife's name. I never asked them to put my name on the deed. It never even crossed my mind. It didn't cross my mind because I didn't think in terms of needing protection from my own son. It was that simple and that foolish. First few months after they moved into the new condo, my son called me all the time. They'd invite me over for dinner. Sometimes they'd ask me to help them carry something or to wait at their place for a repairman to show up. I always went. I went happily. Then the calls started spacing out. First, every 2 weeks, then once a month, then almost never unless they needed something. I started to notice that when I called, he often wouldn't pick up. He'd text back 2 or 3 hours later. I was at a meeting. Mom, what do you need? As if I could only call when I needed something. As if a mother didn't have the right to simply want to hear her son's voice. My daughter-in-law stopped inviting me to their family gatherings. When I asked why they hadn't told me about this dinner or that birthday party, Billick, my son would tell me it was a last-minute thing, that it was just a few people, that I wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway, was always an explanation. Always perfectly reasonable. Always delivered in that calm voice we use when we've already rehearsed what we're saying. But I'm a numbers woman. I've spent 30 years balancing books, and the math on this situation just wasn't adding up. One Sunday, I spent alone because my son had said they had a commitment at his in-laws' house. I sat down and looked through my bank statements. It had been 16 months and my son hadn't paid back a single dime of the down payment. It's not like I had loaned it to him with strict terms. We never put it in writing. But at some point during our conversation, he had said, I'll pay you back little by little, Mom. 16 months. Billions? I didn't confront him that day. I let it be. I kept observing. The diagnosis came in February. My doctor called me with the results and asked me to come down to her office. When a doctor asks you to come in person to get your results, you already know it's not good news. I had a gallbladder issue that required surgery. It wasn't cancer, thank God, but it was urgent. Doctor explained everything calmly and told me I needed to run some additional tests before scheduling the date. I walked out of that office with a list of lab work and a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't exactly fear. It was more like the sudden, heavy realization that I was entirely alone in a waiting room, with nobody there to hold my hand, nobody to tell what I had just heard. Afternoon, I called my son. Mom, it's great that it's nothing serious, he said. His voice sounded distracted. I could hear a television playing in the background. So when is the surgery? I don't know yet. I have to get more tests done. Hey, could you go with me to the clinic on Thursday? It's the blood work. And they told me I have to fast, so I might get a little dizzy afterward. I've got a big presentation at the firm on Thursday, Mom. I can't miss it. Can't one of your neighbors go with you? One of my neighbors? Yeah, I said. Don't worry about it. I went alone. That Thursday and every Thursday after that. That day on Wilshire Boulevard wasn't the first time. It was the day that changed everything. I was just walking out after picking up my final results before the pre-op appointment. I had given my son a heads up 2 days prior. He told me he was going to try to leave work early to give me a ride. I didn't entirely believe him. I held on to the hope that maybe this time he would. When I saw him drive past in his gray SUV without stopping, something inside me shut off. It shut off with the exact precision of a water valve being turned tight. I didn't cry in the cab ride home. I sat up straight, bag of medical tests resting on my lap, watching the streets of Los Angeles blur by through the window. I thought about my husband. I thought about how he would have reacted if he had lived to see this. I thought about all those Sundays I spent baking and selling pies so my son wouldn't feel the absence of his father. And then I stopped thinking about the past, and I started thinking about the future. Cab dropped me off in front of my house. I paid, stepped out, walked inside, and sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of water and a piece of paper. I wrote some things down, ran some numbers, and when I was done, I just stared at what I had written for a long, long time. The very next day, I made an appointment with an estate attorney. His office was over in Glendale, in one of those buildings with lush plants by the entrance and a receptionist who speaks in a near whisper. His name was Mr. Foster. He was a slender man in his 50s, wearing brown-rimmed glasses, and he had this way of listening that made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered. I laid out the whole situation. Down payment I had fronted, the mortgage under my son's name, the 16 months without a single payment, my health issues, everything. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he folded his hands on his desk and asked if I had any proof of the wire transfer I had made. I did. I always keep everything. 30 years of working in accounting teaches you that paper trails are the only witnesses that never lie and never die. I had the bank's receipt for the wire transfer to my son's account, dated the exact day we locked in the down payment, $280,000. Perfectly documented. With this, Mr. Foster told me, you have solid grounds to establish a formal acknowledgement of debt. It's not the fastest route, but it's airtight. What exactly are you hoping to achieve here? I sat there and thought about it for a second. I don't want to take his house away, I said. What I want is for it to be crystal clear that this money was mine, that he owes it to me, and I want that in writing. I don't want it to be just some empty promise, spoken into the wind and forgotten. The attorney nodded. Then, what we need to draft is a promissory note. It has to be signed voluntarily by your son. If he refuses to sign, the road gets rockier. The bank receipt already gives you legal leverage. If he won't sign, we'd have to initiate a different kind of litigation. But let's try opening a dialogue first. People tend to react differently when they realize the paper trail exists and there's a lawyer involved. I walked out of that office feeling calmer than when I walked in. Not because the problem was solved, because for the first time in a very long time, I had a plan. That same week, I called my son to invite him over for lunch. I told him I wanted to see him before the surgery, that we needed to catch up. He agreed without much enthusiasm, but he agreed. We set it up for Saturday at my place. I made a pot roast, which has always been his absolute favorite, ever since he was a little boy. I set the table nicely, brought out the good glasses. I wanted this conversation to start on peaceful ground. He showed up alone. His wife didn't come, which I was privately thankful for. We ate without talking about anything heavy. At first, he asked me how I was feeling. I told him I was fine, practically ready for the operation. He said he was glad to hear it. Then a silence settled over the table, and I seized it. "Son, I need to talk to you about something serious." He looked up from his plate. $280,000 I gave you for the down payment on the condo, I said. I need us to formalize it. I need you to sign a document acknowledging that you owe me that money. His face changed. Not all at once, but gradually, the way the sky shifts colors just before a storm breaks. "Mom, that was a gift," he said. "I never once said it was a gift," I replied. "You told me yourself you were going to pay me back over time." "Yeah, but things have come up, Mom. The expenses, the mortgage, and then the car repairs." "I know, and I'm not demanding the whole lump sum right now. I am asking you to sign a paper that legally states you owe me the money. That's all for now." A notarized document drafted by an attorney. An attorney? He went dead quiet. I watched his brain process it. I watched him desperately dig around for an argument and come up empty. "And if I don't sign," I said, my next words with absolute calm. The kind of calm you only get when you know exactly what you're going to say because you've rehearsed it 1,000 times in the dark. "I have the wire transfer's receipt." Mr. Foster explained to me that the receipt, along with the mortgage timeline, clearly establishes that the funds moved from my account to yours with the documented purpose of securing a down payment. If we can't reach an agreement between the two of us, my next step is litigation. I didn't say it with malice. I said it the way a bookkeeper explains an account balance to someone. Pure, unclouded numbers. My son stared at me for a long, heavy moment. He dropped his gaze back down to the table. "I didn't know you kept that on file," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I always keep everything," I replied. "My whole life." He signed the promissory note 2 weeks later. Mr. Foster drafted the paperwork. We set up a payment plan that was reasonable for him and acceptable for me. And it was all locked in. Stamps, signatures, witnesses. I didn't feel a rush of victory in that moment. I felt something quieter, something incredibly close to the feeling you get when you finally balance a column of numbers that's been driving you crazy for days. That afternoon, walking out of the law office, I strolled 2 blocks down to a local diner. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered a black coffee. Outside, the city rushed by with its usual noise and endless hurry. I thought about my husband. He would have loved knowing that his wife never let herself get walked all over. He would have loved seeing that all those years of teaching me to file papers and understand numbers ended up saving more than just my career. I thought about my son. Not with bitterness, even though I had every right to it. I thought about the little boy he used to be, teenager who lost his dad way too young. The man he eventually became, with all his flaws, his debts, and his gray SUV. I still loved him. I was always going to love him. But it's one thing to love somebody, and it's a completely different thing to let that love be weaponized as an excuse to treat you like you're completely worthless. The coffee was good. I drank it slow. The surgery happened 3 weeks later. It went smoothly. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days, and by the third, I was back home. My son came to visit me on the first day in recovery. He showed up with a bouquet of flowers from the hospital gift shop. One of those cheap bouquets you just know was grabbed at the very last second. He showed up. He sat in the chair next to my bed and stayed for a long while, barely speaking a word. At one point, he reached out and took my hand, and I let him. We didn't bring up the lawyer. We didn't talk about the condo, the money, or that day on Wilshire Boulevard. We just sat there, mother and son, with everything that had been said hovering in the cold air between us. Sometimes that's the most honest thing you can possibly have. Months rolled by. My son started making his payments right on time, exactly as the contract dictated. It wasn't a massive amount each month, but it was consistent. First time I saw that deposit hit my checking account, I just stared at the glowing numbers on my phone screen for a lot longer than I probably needed to. Things between us never went back to the way they used to be. But they didn't stay stuck in our darkest moments, either. Is a new distance between us now. One that we both acknowledge without ever giving it a name. It's a distance I no longer try to bridge with unasked for sacrifices or unreturned money. When he calls me, I pick up. When I call him, he answers. It's a hell of a lot better than what we had before. One Sunday, I went over to their place for lunch. My daughter-in-law was polite. Not warm, polite. We ate out on the balcony of that Silver Lake condo, the exact condo my life savings secured the down payment for. And I sipped a glass of iced tea, looking out over the sprawling city from the 5th floor. I didn't feel bitter. I felt something a lot more complicated and a lot more honest. I felt like I was sitting there exactly as I am. A woman who worked her entire life, who loved with everything she had, who made the tragic mistake of confusing love with self-sacrifice, and who, at 63 years old, finally figured out that there was still time to correct that mistake. There's one specific thing I've kept tucked inside my purse ever since that cab ride away from Wilshire Boulevard. It's a small photograph, one of those cheap prints you get developed at CVS. A picture of me on my son's graduation day. I'm in the second row of the auditorium, my eyes shining, wearing a smile that takes up my whole face. I don't keep it to remind me of what I lost. I keep it to remind me of what I am capable of feeling. To remind myself that the woman in that photo, the one weeping tears of pure joy in the second row, is the exact same woman who walked alone to the street corner, hailed a cab, and decided that enough was finally enough. Aren't two different women. They are the same person. And truly understanding that cost me a lot more than I care to admit. It cost a hell of a lot less than never understanding it at all. To anyone listening to this, anyone who sees a reflection of their own life in this story because you've lived some version of it, I'll tell you what I had to learn all by myself. Standing on a scorching sidewalk on Wilshire Boulevard, someone does not mean erasing yourself. Is helping someone does not mean giving away the very ground you need to stand on. When someone drives right past you with an empty passenger seat and plenty of room to spare, moment is screaming a truth you've been refusing to hear for a very long time. Listen to it. Keep your receipts, know your rights, and drink your coffee slow by the window, watching the city roll by. There is still a whole lot of daylight left. Loving doesn't mean disappearing. Rose reminds us that a mother can give absolutely everything she has and still retain the ironclad right to keep something for herself. Her dignity, her savings, her voice. You don't have to stop loving someone to start respecting yourself. Sometimes, bravest thing you can possibly do isn't forgiving in silence. It's sitting down at the table, demanding exactly what is fair, drinking your coffee nice and slow while life keeps moving forward. A gentle clarification with love. This story was constructed and narrated by artificial intelligence with the purpose of entertaining while simultaneously sharing a positive message that will hopefully reach the heart of anyone who needs it. This narrative is a work of fiction generated and voiced entirely through artificial intelligence. Its sole and exclusive purpose is to provide entertainment, as well as to offer a moral reflection for the audience. All characters described herein, including Rose, her son, her daughter-in-law, and Mr. Foster, along with the situations narrated, are the product of algorithmic invention. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, actual families, or historical events is purely coincidental and lacks any intention of depicting the life of any specific individual. Although the narrative mentions real geographical locations such as Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Wilshire Boulevard, Glendale, or Silvers Lake, these areas have been utilized exclusively for descriptive purposes to provide atmosphere for this fictional plot. It is imperative to underline that the scenarios described in the story, which involve legal procedures, financial transactions, notarized agreements such as a promissory note, and medical processes, have been dramatized strictly for narrative purposes. Under no circumstances should this material be interpreted, considered, or used as professional legal, financial, medical, psychological, estate planning advice. It is highly recommended that, when facing any family conflict, real estate dispute, capital recovery issue, or health problems similar to those presented, the user always consults with certified professionals, attorneys, estate planners, physicians. The creators and distributors of this content expressly decline any and all liability, direct or indirect, arising from the interpretation, application, or use that any individual decides to make of the actions depicted in this work.